Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
Canada has signed a raw materials agreement with Europe to cut reliance on China. Is that a good move?
Well, I think it's the kind of thing that people want to hear right now because China's ongoing saber rattling on so many different fronts, holding 2 Canadians in prison as hostages, which is an unsavory thing to be doing. I've been talking with friends and family out of Hong Kong. People are leaving. Hong Kong is emptying out. All the Western families are getting out of there right now. They're selling their goods because your child can be stopped and harassed and searched and disappear for 48 hours under the law of Hong Kong. You know, I lived in Hong Kong back when I was early in my career as a young journalist. We enjoyed a lot of freedom there. We knew it was a place where you had to be careful and respectful of local traditions and customs, but it was a British colony at the time. Yeah, I know colonization is bad or out of fashion, but it was a great life for all those who lived there because rights and freedoms were protected. Free speech existed and was protected, and now it's gone. And just last week I sat with a friend who just come out of Hong Kong, and his family is on a flight out in a few days. They're fearful for their lives there. They're seeing what's happening to people, and anyone who can get out of Hong Kong now is getting the heck out. That's a trading partner, China, that we have, that we depend on for a lot of things. They're taking their society in a very dark direction.
I know when President Xi became the leader, there were high hopes that he would be a moderate, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
No, they are threatened by freedom of speech. They want control. You know, those who've traveled in China in recent times have seen the kind of social controls that are now just commonplace anywhere you go. And then there's, extreme examples of repression as well. So it's all very disturbing. And how do we, in this complicated world, we depend every day. I mean, look around. I'm looking at my desk here right now, Jim. There's a lot of things sitting here that are made in China. There's probably things I might buy in the next 6 months that will be made in China. We can't easily, or maybe even want to, change that. I mean, how would we find an alternative? It's so complicated. And trade's a two-way thing. We send a huge amount of especially commodities from Canada to China. That provides to a great degree the quality of life that Canadians enjoy. You don't just stop doing that. And yet, right now, diplomacy is not bringing our two nations closer together. When it comes to standing on principles, look at Australia. I think they've been determined. They've made sacrifices in trade, and they've been resourceful and flexible in developing new markets. I think Canada's going to be shortly in that space where they have to consider what stand we're making. It's very difficult. I don't envy the people who are in these decisions. I know it's easy to criticize, but these are very consequential decisions. Every step we take has all kinds of implications for the quality of life and our freedoms ultimately in Canada. As far as I can tell, things are in good hands at this end. I mean, it's not perfect, obviously. And the next few years are going to be really important. The the alliance in the G7 has clearly made some steps to recognize this. I think people are very hesitant. They don't want to be out calling out China loudly because of the delicacy of trade relationships. China is not tapering off or plateauing as a player in global trade. It's very much on the increase. Contrary to a lot of expectations during COVID, that saw, of course, a massive decline in global energy use, oil and gas use. China's bounced right back. Not just bounced back, but they've increased far beyond what would have been expected. And so it's a message that's saying to us, hey, the Chinese economy is very healthy right now, which means their factories are running, which means they're exporting. Someone's buying that. Canadians are buying more. We don't have another supplier of essential things that we can just simply turn to. There's competitors, sure, but there's nothing like China out there. So this is
all the factories in North America packed up and moved to China. And I saw a show too how all these closed down factories in the U.S. Rust Belt, places like Chicago and Detroit, where Chinese businesses are bidding on that scrap metal, then building whatever that particular factory built and sending it back to the U.S.
Yes. Canada has been part of that too. We've exported so much of that productive capacity there, knowing that we can take advantage of modern manufacturing costs being so low and also modern transportation being so cheap. It's been pointed out recently that putting something on a ship and moving it from point A to point B is essentially no cost exercise. Yes, of course, it costs money to fuel and lease a ship and put things in containers, but it costs such a small amount for each, consumer item that's on board that ship that it may as well be for free. That's how cheap transportation is.
Well, where I live in Greater Vancouver, I watch ships come in every day and be loaded with raw logs to disappear someplace else instead of that lumber being processed here. Is that ever going to change? Where we're shipping off raw logs to China or wherever else in the world and then bringing back the finished product? Why can't we make the furniture here?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a trend towards the higher value. And, when we see some logs, there's really not very many logs. I mean, yeah, a shipload of logs, there's a lot of logs if you're standing looking at the ship. Compared to the sheer scale, the volume of the BC forest industry, raw logs are declining and already pretty small as that. I know no one likes to see them, but where the real money is for BC is in that higher value side of it, which comes in part from higher value fiber, from trees that have special qualities that can't just grow anywhere, because we've got, especially here in the rainforest, big trees with tight grain and all those qualities you want for certain building materials. We have that in abundance, and we also have an industry that is moving in the direction of adding as much value to these logs in Canada before the end product is shipped out. So, I mean, there's in an industry of this scale, you have many parts, including some log trade. But I think the current government has done a lot to respond to public demands on that and change the cost. It's more expensive to export a raw log. I mean, it's not illegal to do it. I mean, it's more expensive and there's less incentive to do it. And that's what the policy lever is that the government has moved. And I think generally speaking, compared to a few years ago, there's very much less, of a public discussion on raw logs, because generally most people would say, well, that's pretty much solved. I think what we really need to be thinking right now is for that specialty log that we've got on the West Coast, the cedar, other species like fir, let's make sure that we're harvesting it sustainably, that we're replanting the forest when it's harvested, make sure that the environmental concerns, are just counting up the number of old growth management areas. Right now, we're not talking about parks, but just in the areas that can be forested, that can be harvested, there's something like 3 million hectares of old growth that is protected. This isn't just, random expanses of old growth. This is little areas that the Forest Service has said, those trees are really special right now. We're not going to be touching those. We're going to essentially, on a map, at least draw a line around them. We're going to fence them in, so to speak. And there's 3 million hectares. Recently I know there's been some really radical, far out claims being made by some of the forest activists, who don't seem to understand the basics of forest science or forest management. There's a vast amount of parkland that is old growth that is never ever going to be logged. But you've got this almost a hysteria that, the last old growth tree is about to be logged, and Jim, it just isn't. It's so far from the truth. It's unbelievable that this is even being said.
Hasn't the provincial government given First Nations even more say about what to protect?
Well, I think we're now in the UNDRIP era. That's the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And under that, First Nations, there's probably 3 or 4 different clauses in the UNDRIP language that has been adopted into Canadian law that gives First Nations economic rights and self-government rights to be able to make decisions about the territories that they hold to be their traditional territories or treaty lands. And right now we have these urban protesters are driving out to Fairy Creek to literally try to stop the Pacheedaht First Nation from making its rightful decisions on its own territory. There's even, and I've seen this, Jim, it's unbelievable. They're circulating talking points among these sort of drop-in, drive-out protesters that if they see anyone from the Pacheedaht First Nation, they are to tell them that they're not welcome on these lands. Go away. You are not welcome here. That's what the Pacheedaht themselves are being told by these outside protesters, which is staggering. I don't know where they are coming from, really. It's mind-boggling. But I think the fact that First Nations have got a high degree of economic sovereignty around decisions made, is a step in the right direction. They should be able to share fully in the quality of life that all Canadians enjoy. It's a historic wrong that has to be righted, and a lot of progress is being made towards that I see in terms of economic engagement and economic reconciliation. The future of success for all Canadians is going to be about people having the free agency to do the things that they wish to pursue as individuals, as communities, as Indigenous rights holders. Let's get out of their way.
I think Aboriginal people are tired of other people telling them how to manage their land. It's been going on for 400 years.
It has been. And, what we see in Fairy Creek with these anti-forest groups, it's really just the latest form of colonization. And, when industry and government have been working so hard to get out of the way of First Nations, to withdraw, let those people who have those rights exercise those rights. Here we have this new wave of these self-appointed, I don't know who they represent. They certainly don't represent, anyone elected or with any sort of authority. They just sort of pop up. It's a fringe mentality that somehow they have a right to determine the future of local Indigenous people who've been there for tens of thousands of years. I mean, what is going on?
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, does President Joe Biden favor Russia over Canada when it comes to pipelines?
Yeah, I think there was an expectation that the new Democrat administration would be kind of warm and fuzzy when it came to things to do with Canada, but it's not playing out that way. In fact, Joe Biden is proving to be about as good for Canada as Vladimir Putin is. Maybe even worse. I mean, we expect better of Biden, and he disappoints us. The first thing he did in office earlier in the year was to cancel the KXL pipeline, which is a blow to working people on both sides of the border. It's a blow to North American energy sovereignty. It's a blow to environmental safety and protection. Biden does not support safe forms of energy transportation. He does not support the world's most improving source of crude oil, which is Canada. He calls himself an environmentalist, but he's anything but. And, I think the most egregious thing we're seeing is the recent case where there was a very controversial pipeline being built from Russia to Germany to carry natural gas, Russian natural gas, Siberian natural gas to the European industrial heartland. For years, the Americans blocked that under Donald Trump. It was blocked for a variety of reasons. But since becoming president, Joe Biden has decided, I kind of like that Vladimir Putin pipeline, and now he has decided that he's fine with it, even though the European Parliament called for the pipeline to be stopped. Even though Vladimir Putin puts his opponents in jail and essentially murders them in slow motion, Joe Biden is supportive of that. I mean, I can't even believe I'm saying those words, but it's absolutely factual and true that this is what's happening. So while he's opposing Canadian energy sovereignty and North American regional economic strength, he's propping up Putin. Why would he do this? It's really difficult to say why he's also not able to be supportive of existing energy infrastructure in North America. For example, Line 5, that's owned by Enbridge. It transports like 500,000 barrels a day plus of crude and natural gas liquids out to Ontario and Quebec. I mean, of course, once this starts happening and it affects Toronto, well, of course, it's a big issue. I mean, when these issues are only affecting Alberta and Saskatchewan and BC, who cares in Ottawa? They don't really care at all. But as soon as they're realizing that maybe we can't drive our cars and heat our homes if this happens. So, Canada, in facing the governor of Michigan's opposition to Line 5, which has been around for decades, and the Michigan governor wants to literally close it down, crippling Pearson Airport and cutting off half of the fuel even Michigan gets. It's bizarro land, right? You'd think that maybe Biden, given that this is international affairs and the relationship between two countries on either side of the world's longest undefended border, we're so proud of that, aren't we? Well, where's Joe Biden? I don't know. He's nowhere to be seen, refusing to have anything to do with protecting the source of energy that comes from the west to the east. So you start to, you see a pattern here. Biden is in favor of Russian energy infrastructure in Europe. He's against Canada having an outlet for its crude oil to world markets. Biden is against Canada having a way of getting its own energy to parts of the country that are served by a pipeline crossing into the United States. What's his end game? I don't think there's really an end game, though. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I just think it's inattention. They don't really care. Canada's not visible to the U.S. In Washington, they have other things they're concerned about. And it's certainly not Canada, which is a real break from the past. I mean, who doesn't think of that special relationship as being a part of being Canadian? That we've got this incredible relationship with the States. Maybe in part because the border has been closed for so long, the view of Canada to Americans and the view of America to Canadians is receding. Hopefully that will change when the border's back open. But in the meantime, we have this double standard presidency who will do nothing to serve the needs of an ally. And so where does it point? Where I'm going with this, Jim, it's pretty simple. If Canada doesn't stand up for Canada, then nobody else will. And that's why we're now starting to see a resurrection of an idea that's been a bit dormant for a while. Some people maybe thought it was extinct. I never did. And that is the Energy East project, or something, that basically does what Energy East would have done. That is to say, a crude oil pipeline that gets Canadian oil from Alberta to the Atlantic Ocean.
And there are certain things that oil and gas do that nothing else does. I know they'd like us to switch to electricity. Where's that electricity going to come from? And Ontario is a perfect example. They thought they'd have a green source of energy for electricity. They don't. And people in Ontario now have to make the choice between paying their power bill or buying groceries because it's so expensive.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it was just yesterday that, I think it was Greenpeace in Munich. They flew a powered paraglider with a motor, by a guy into a stadium where is it France and Germany are playing at the European Championship. So this guy floats in, he sails in from the sky, he almost knocks over one of those lines that is used for the camera. Debris going all over the place. People think they're going to die. There's debris falling on the ground because this guy comes in.
Several people were hurt.
Yeah, and the parasol, what does it say? It says kick out oil. Oh, it's a very funny pun to do with soccer. Brilliant. But here's the thing, Jim. You take a look at the guy. There he is on the ground after. They took him away. Now Greenpeace has apologized because it was such a boneheaded, stupid thing to do. They've actually apologized now. I hope they're paying the costs of it. But let's look at the image. So here's this guy. He's got this sort of polyester parachute with these nylon ropes on it. There he is sitting on the field. There's a close-up picture of it. You can see all of this in detail. He's got a plastic or fiberglass helmet. He's wearing some plastic sunglasses. He's got a jacket, a nice Greenpeace jacket that's made of some sort of hydrocarbon-based fabrics. He's on his back. He's got this motor that I don't know how it's driven. I mean, it's got an exhaust thing on it, so it's probably running on fossil fuels. And it's made out of metal and plastics. Like he's like a poster boy for everything to do with oil and gas products. Flying into a stadium using a fossil fuel powered motor on his back with a plastic oil and gas manufactured sail saying kick out oil. I mean, it's the biggest joke you can imagine. I mean, it does serve one thing. It serves to remind us that we have these products at the center of our life, And yes, we can criticize them. Yes, we can recognize that there are ways in which they're not perfect. They don't align to some, philosophical ideal of what perfection should be, granted. But what does in life, it just is reminiscent of what Greenpeace did a few years ago in South America. There was some big international governing event taking place, so they took the opportunity to go to one of the rarest national special sites and carve a message into these slow-growing foliage areas that was, I don't know if it was keck-out oil, something like that. Anyways, everyone was in a lather, rightly so, because they had desecrated a national historic site of the host country. It seems like everything they do only points to the complexity of things. So in a way, I guess we can appreciate Greenpeace doing this because it's reminded us that even Greenpeace has absolutely no way to do anything at all, without its deep reliance on fossil fuels. So when we hear people say, oh, we just need to get off fossil fuels, it's so easy. Well, if it's so easy, that protester should have been floating in on a magic, rainbow of some kind, wearing, I don't know, hemp clothing or whatever. But no, it's all plastic. It's all fossil fuels. That's my rant, Jim.
By the way, Greenpeace Canada is registered as a non-profit rather than a charity, which means that donations are not eligible for income tax credits. So I don't know what that tells you about the organization, but they're not a charity, folks.
Yeah, well, what it means is that they have a free hand to do as much lobbying as they like, which is really what it's about. I mean, the thing is, basically in 2021, after decades of this, we kind of have figured out what the model is here. It's create some public outrage, turn that outrage into an approach to politicians to say, hey, look how outraged the public is about this issue. You have to do something about it. And so politicians say, all right, we're going to ban plastic straws. Save the world that way. And rinse and repeat. So whatever the next thing is, ban old growth forestry, which is a really dumb thing to do. And it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I know the emotional appeal of saying something like that. I know people in some cases would say, oh, come on, Stu, you're wrong. We should ban old growth forestry. But actually, if you look at the science and the facts of it, I would say we should manage it. We should keep those forests healthy. We should make sure they're productive and wildlife is respected, but we don't need to ban it. I mean, that would be moving backwards in very much the wrong direction.
Stewart,
yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Okay, thank you.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at S.J. Muir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com and we'll ask those questions for you. Find us on Talk Digital Network, that's YouTube. We're also on Twitter at HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.